This is a new day. This is a new day full of sound and light, expectation. This day has been waiting for you. It's been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day's been waiting with open arms, just for you. This is the day that we've been given. Let's not waste it. Come now, and let us worship together. Please rise in body and spirit as we sing hymn 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. And that'll be in the teal hymnal, 1008.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear the voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Good morning. I am Kathleen Hogue. I'm the Religious Education Director here at UUYO. I'm just here to tell you about some announcements. Number one, all active members of UUYO are invited and encouraged to attend our annual business meeting for the purpose of reviewing activities of the past year, including the operating budget. We will act on the proposed budget for 2025, as well as elect new members to the Board of Trustees and to the Endowment Committee. Lunch will follow, and childcare is available. Meta meditation on Monday, that would be tomorrow, is canceled just for this Monday in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Happy hour, that was planned to take place this Thursday, is postponed until further notice. Children will be remaining with us in the service today. Kids, please help yourself quietly to the toys, books, and activity packs that are in the back corner. Just remember to return them when you're done. And now we'll have the chalice lighting.
Good morning once again. I hope everybody's well and prepared for what's looking to be a pretty chilly week. So today, as we light this chalice to open our service and remind ourselves that change starts with within, we're also lighting this candle for a little bit extra warmth in here. Today, as part and portion of this service, we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. According to the Department of Defense Education Activity Report, which is a really interesting source of information that I'm about to read a quote from, like the Department of Defense about Dr. King, but that's where I got it. According to that report, quote, Americans celebrated the first official Martin Luther King Day, which is the only federal holiday commemorating an African American, on Monday, January 20th, 1986. In 1994, Congress designated the holiday as a National Day of Service, marking the third Monday in January every year as the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. Dr. King advocated for nonviolent resistance to overcome injustice as a means of lifting racial oppression. He created change with organized sit-ins, marches, and peaceful demonstrations that highlighted issues of inequality. Dr. King received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. He was the youngest person to ever receive this high honor. And on April 4th, 1968, at the age of only 39, I'm 44, he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, as he stood on the balcony of his hotel. Dr. King had traveled to Memphis, Tennessee to lead a march in support of striking sanitation workers. I can't really imagine what it would be like to have a public influential figure such as Dr. King assassinated. I'm not old enough to have lived through Robert Kennedy or his older brother's assassination, Dr. King, Malcolm X, these things happening within 4 years of one another. But I do remember when Dr. Martin Luther King Day, as it's popularly called, started and when it became a federal holiday. I was 14 in 1994 and in high school, and so I was, of course, happy to get a day off from school. But I also remember the eye rolls of some of the older adults in my community and life whenever the new holiday was discussed. I didn't really understand it then. I mean, why did my grandfather talk a lot about the new holiday? Like, what did he care? Why did sometimes he discuss it in a tone that suggested perhaps it was a joke? But I didn't know that much about Dr. King then. I only mainly knew that he was a hero of the Civil Rights era, and the Civil Rights era wasn't exactly talked about that much in Columbiana, Ohio either. So there was that. It wasn't until I was exposed to Mahatma Gandhi's writing in college that I began to understand really what Dr. King was advocating for. And it wasn't until I was in graduate school that I realized there were other leadership options in the era we called the Civil Rights Movement. Leadership voices that use words like white devil or that condone violence towards people. For a long time, the thing I thought I knew about Martin Luther King Jr. is that he wrote one of my favorite quotes. Be the change that you wish to see in the world. I love that quote. Be the change you want to see. Don't wait for others. Don't try to change other people in order to create change. Just be the change yourself. Lead by example. The journey of 100 miles begins with a single step, etc., etc. Like many of the things I thought I knew about Dr. King, however, I was mistaken. Dr. King was paraphrasing something Mahatma Gandhi actually said. In fact, Gandhi actually said this, quote, "We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. It is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do." End quote. Gandhi was revealing a profound spiritual truth, that what we see in the world is no more and no less a reflection of what is unseen inside of ourselves. As we change ourselves, grow, and evolve in our journey, so too does the universe change in its relationship to and through us. By changing ourselves, we change the world, as we ourselves are the universe in microcosm. Today, we light this chalice to mirror the spark of change that we hope ignites inside of ourselves to bring light into a world anew. Thank you. And let this light shine and the warmth of it rub off on one another as we take this moment to greet our neighbors, friends. He or she could probably take it.
So today we're trying something new. Now we've done this before, of course, especially during COVID when we were all online, but today we are going to have the pictures for the story projected on the screen. So the story today is Child of the Civil Rights Movement by Paula Young Shelton and Raul Colon. Mama and Daddy were from the South. They grew up with Jim Crow laws that said that black people had to sit at the back of the bus, could not eat in restaurants that were for whites only, and couldn't vote. I was born in New York, where there was no Jim Crow. One day we were watching the news and saw something called Freedom Riders. They were black and white students riding from the north to the south together, sitting right beside each other. They were trying to get Jim Crow changed. But racists were pulling them off the buses and beating them. They even set some of the buses on fire. Mom and Dad said we had to go help, so we went back to Georgia and Jim Crow, where whites could but blacks could not, back to the heart of the civil rights movement. At first, I thought I would find a big black crow in our new home in Atlanta that would squawk whenever a black person tried to get a good seat. But it was really a white man who lived long ago who was not very nice to black people. One Sunday after church, we went to the nice Holiday Inn that just opened up to have brunch, but they would not let us in. They had nice chandeliers, fancy tablecloths, and lots of empty tables. That is where I staged my first protest. I was only 4 years old, so I sat down right there in the middle of everyone and cried. I remember when I was little, my Uncle Martin taught me how to swim. I would jump into his arms and he would pretend to throw me in. He was a really good friend, not really my uncle, but our fathers worked together, our mothers worried together, and we all struggled together. We shared a common goal, the common good. We were one family. Like all families, we had dinner together. One night I sat under a table in our kitchen and watched and listened to some of the arguments, tears, and sometimes angry, booming voices as the grown-ups talked. They were talking about Selma, Alabama, where people were organizing a march from Selma to Montgomery to try to get the right to vote. They all sounded to me like instruments tuning up before a concert. "We've got to go back to Selma," Jose said in his tooting tuba voice. "We should wait," said my daddy with his mellow saxophone voice of reason. Soon the whole band joined in until Mama chimed in like a flute saying, "Don't forget, we have to get the kids and the women involved. Then the march will be a success." Uncle Martin sat listening to the band, knowing that each instrument was important, but also knowing that in the end, they must come together like a symphony and agree on what to do. Soon it was time for dinner, and I got to bring in the basket of cornbread. The talk continued through dinner, and after dinner there were hugs and kisses and handshakes goodbye, and they had a plan. They would march. Now, Daddy had been on marches, protests, and demonstrations before, and had even been beaten, arrested, and put in jail. This time, when Daddy was getting ready to go, Mama said, "I'm marching too." So they packed up their 3 little girls, and we headed to Selma. We met at the Brown Chapel Church the next morning with thousands of others. I looked around and saw so many people, black and white, young and old, rich and poor, people from the north and people from the south, people of many different religions too. Everyone was excited, and we began to march. Since I was only 4, I could only walk a little at a time. So I walked when I could. Sometimes I rode on Daddy's back. Daddy bounced me up and down as he ran back and forth along the line, singing songs and keeping up the spirits of the people on the march. I got down to march with them. Many times, Mama asked me if I wanted to ride in a special cart. I told her, no, I want to march. Finally, I let her pick me up and carry me. I fell asleep long after the sun went down and woke up at my granny's house the next morning. Mama and Daddy continued on. It took 4 days to march the 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery. The National Guard kept the peace and made sure the marchers stayed safe the whole walk. It was on TV, and many people across the country watched, including President Johnson. One day, we saw Uncle Martin on the TV with President Johnson signing a bill that made it so all people could vote. We all talked about the march, the singing, the praying, friends and family, and even their tired feet. I was proud to know that I had played a part. But even then, I knew that there were more battles, more marches to come, and one day, when Mama and Daddy were too tired to march, the job would pass on to us, and we would march on, children of the civil rights movement. The end. So now I invite you to look into your order of service and read the covenant with me. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
It's good to remind ourselves from time to time that the offering that we collect here is symbolic as well as practical. We pass the plate during our worship service to make a community expression of thanks for the blessings of abundance and to support our community in a tangible way. This month, our offering goes to Loop Youngstown to help purchase a building to create an arts and culture center in Youngstown. The Loop in Youngstown envisions a vibrant scene within our city of artist mentoring, performances, residencies, and more. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of our church, the Mahoning Valley, and our wider world.
So now we're going to play a game. So I want all my volunteers to come up with me, and we're going to play a game called Name That Ally. So what's going to happen here is each of these nice volunteers are going to read from their card some information about a famous ally. And when we're talking about ally, we're specifically right now talking about a racial justice ally. So in order, yeah, they're getting in order. There we go. Okay. So the one rule here is please don't yell out who it is until after she or he is done reading the card, okay? Okay, here we go.
She was 39 when she was killed by Ku Klux Klan members near Selma, Alabama, where she was supporting the 1965 Civil Rights March to Montgomery. The UU activist from Detroit was one of dozens of lay people who came to Alabama after the murder of the Reverend James Reeb, one of many UU ministers who rushed to Selma at the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s urgent request. Anybody?
Shout it out if you know it. Okay, you can give it out.
Viola Liuzzo, 1925 to 1965. So she was 40.
He was a judge known as proponent of radical change. Speaking at a Harlem church, he proclaimed, "The cancer of segregation will never be cured by the sedative of gradualism." He opened the all-white Democratic primary in South Carolina to African Americans with his rulings in Elmore versus Rice and Brown versus Baskin. His memorial service, held in Charleston, South Carolina, was conducted by the Charleston branch of the NAACP. Approximately 200 African Americans and less than a dozen white persons attended his burial in Magnolia Cemetery. Julius Waites Waring, 1880 to 1968.
And number 3, she was an American socialist, suffragist, journalist, and co-founder of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She combined her civil rights activism with her commitment to the struggle for women's voting rights. In 1921, she wrote to a leading suffragist to request that a black woman be invited to the National Women's Party's celebration of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. And her name was... Who spoke? No. But that socialist thing kind of, right, yeah. So her name was Mary White Ovington, who was born right after the Civil War in 1865 and died in 1951.
She is known as one of the earliest and most loyal champions of civil rights. Over the course of her long life, she was a constant presence in Alabama politics and the movement for civil rights. Her life spanned most of the 20th century. In 1938, while living in Washington, she became one of the founding members of the Southern Conference for Human Welfare. She was involved with a number of civil rights cases along with her husband Clifford, a lawyer. When Rosa Parks was arrested in 1955 for refusing to give up her seat in a Montgomery bus to a white man, Clifford bailed her out of jail. It's not Clifford. This is Virginia Foster Durr, 1903 to 1999.
All right, and our fifth ally, he has been involved in organizing and leading pilgrimages to civil rights sites since 2004. During the first weeks after becoming ordained, he was in Selma, Alabama, taking part in early phases of the 1965 voting rights campaign there. Much of his knowledge and experience come from his time living in Mississippi from 1969 to 1984, when he was the only Unitarian Universalist minister in the state. For 7 of those years, he was also an investigator for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. In retirement, he and his wife Judy now live in Knoxville, Tennessee. Which ally am I describing? She looked off my card while I was standing in line. Nothing. No, it was completely honest. Yes, you're right. The Reverend Dr. Gordon.
The last ally was a social worker, a Unitarian Universalist minister, and the father of 4. He was severely beaten by a group of white men in Selma on March 9, 1965. He died 2 days later on March 11th. He had traveled to Selma to support the civil rights movement and voting rights following Bloody Sunday. The U.S. Congress and President Johnson sent the Voting Rights Act to Congress within days. Dr. King, invited to Washington to support the Voting Rights Act, declined. Instead, he delivered the eulogy at his funeral. Is that Reverend James Reed? Yes. And he lived from 1927 to 1965.
Well, that was fun. Let's keep it going. Please rise in body or spirit, if you're able, to join our voices together in singing hymn 1053, again in the teal hymnal, same smaller hymnal as last time. 1053, How Could Anyone Ever Tell You?
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
So we're gonna do a meditation. I like the meditations that are called guided meditations, and so that's what we're gonna do. And so this meditation is called Marching as an Ally. So I invite you to relax, get comfortable, close your eyes, and begin to breathe in and out slowly, paying close attention to your breathing. Make your breath in and your breath out longer and slower. And as you breathe in and out again, see yourself marching in a crowd of people all together for the same cause. In this meditation, I used the words and ideas of Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhist teacher and legendary protester who marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King. So as you are still marching, imagine yourself lifting your legs up and down, up and down. Every step is healing. Every step is healing. In these steps, your body is literally healing. It's not just a metaphor, but that your body heals and is aligned to purpose. Every step, you are doing your part to heal a broken system. It is healing both to your body and to your cause. Each step that you take in resistance to a power that is much greater than only you. You are surrounded by others in solidarity together, fighting together against the power. And that through this marching, you enact real change. You make your voice heard. You make your body seen. You unite with others in the mission to heal this broken system. The next step you take, you are healing into the past. All those protesters who have suffered injury while they marched. You are healing those protesters who have suffered injury after they marched because they were protesting. You heal the wound created by our oppressors. Every step you take as an activist is a miracle because so few take that step. As you fight to stand up against what's wrong, to resist, and to use your body and your voice and your presence to represent your beliefs, you fight against the horrible things that are happening. You fight against the injustice, the inhumanity, the genocide. As you fight, it's a miracle because so many have died fighting. So many have died before they've had a chance to fight. So many are afraid to fight. So many don't know how to fight. So many do not think that they need to fight. So many have given up the fight. So many can't fight because they are already fighting just to stay alive. So as you step, each step is a miracle because as you march and as you protest, you are in the midst of your own miracle. All the factors coming together to allow you to have this time and space to protest and to fight for what is right. Your next step is freedom. Every step is freedom. As you step as a protester, you create the freedom of speech for the oppressed. You open space for people to exist, merely to exist, merely for their own human rights. You protest not only for your cause, but also for them. Every step is freedom. Every step is freedom because you are exercising your right to free speech. Every step you are exercising your right to oppose. Every step, your right to resist. Freedom is in every step. As you step and fight for those who cannot always fight for their lives because they're caring for other people. Every step is life. We march for those living now and for those who have lived in the past. We are marching for those who will never know that we have marched for them. Every step is life. Every step you honor the preciousness of life. Every step you use your walk to show how important this cause is. Every step you use your march to show that you are alive. Now begin returning to the room, tired from the march, but blessed with love, compassion, and companionship of your fellow marchers. Thank you. Thank you for marching. Thank you for using your voice. Thank you.
Please join me, in a responsive reading. It can be found inserted in your order of service. The instructions note that you all will read the bold passages, and I will read words that are not in bold, but the font seems all the same to my eyes, unless I got a different version. I'm taking the laughter to mean that none of us have bold. You'll note that the alternating, like second, fourth, etc., statements are in quotes, quotation marks around them. Those would be the quoted passages for the ones that you could feel free to respond with, friends. We'll try it out. May we create truth and love in a world of hate, believing that unnamed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. May we continue to work for justice, equity, and compassion in all human relations in a world that is unjust, knowing that change does not roll in on the wind and ability, but comes through continuous struggle. May we always seek to forgive, remembering that there is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. May we strive for the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, knowing that wars are poor chisels for carving out peaceful tomorrows. And when the struggle seems too great, the road too long, the burden too much to bear, may we travel on together, continuing the good fight and praying that someday we shall overcome.
In our game earlier, we heard ever so briefly about what it has been like to be an ally working for racial justice in the past. But what is it that the word ally really means? Being an ally isn't just a buzzword for Unitarian Universalism. It's woven into who we are as a people of faith. But like any group that's been predominantly white, we've had to take a hard look into the mirror. Sure, we've marched against racism from the abolition movement to Black Lives Matter, but we've also had to confront our own blind spots along the way. In the turbulent days of the civil rights movement, Unitarian and Universalist congregations across the South faced moral crossroads. Reverend Dr. Gordon Gibson captures these pivotal moments in his book, Southern Witness, Unitarians and Universalists in the Civil Rights Era. He's one of the people that you heard about earlier. This book tells stories that range from inspiring to heartbreaking across 10 southern states and nearly 30 communities. These weren't just abstract struggles or over ideology. They were deep personal battles. Imagine it. You're in your congregation, you're down there in Schweitzer Lounge, and you're having a conversation that gets pretty heated. And what's it about? What's it about? They were deep personal battles fought in church basements and on the front lawns. We learn about Reverend Donald Thompson, who paid for his convictions with a bullet in his back, driven from Jackson, Mississippi by those who couldn't tolerate his message of equality. And Reverend Albert D. Orlando, who watched helplessly as the KKK turned his New Orleans church and home into a tower of smoke and flames. Then there's Robert Williams, who pushed the civil rights movement in radical new directions with his Black Power advocacy. But Reverend Gibson's book isn't just about the leaders who made the headlines. It's about the quiet revolutionaries, too, the small lay-led fellowships that sprouted up across the South like seeds of change. These tiny congregations, part of the broader fellowship movement, often became unexpected centers of resistance. Some members found their voices in the struggle, transforming from passive churchgoers to passionate activists. Others, as Gibson honestly recounts, dug in their heels against the tide of change, showing how even progressive religious communities wrestled with the challenges of their time. The most important thing that we can do in this racism work is to become allies. Reverend Fred Small says in his sermon, "To be an ally." To be an ally means devotion to the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to see our common humanity gleaming through the scar tissue of oppression, and to champion against it against every assault. It means living the principle that a threat to freedom anywhere is a threat to freedom everywhere, and that none of us is free until all of us is free. When the history books are written, what will they say about Unitarian Universalists today? Will they say that we were afraid to speak up for our brothers and sisters? Or will they say that we had the courage to be allies? Being an ally demands courage to cleanse and heal wounds of prejudice, hatred, and violence. To do this, we must love justice more than comfort, peace more than passivity. The work isn't a sprint. It's more like a relay race that'll keep going long after we're gone. But every time we choose justice over comfort, peace over staying quiet, that's when we add our link to the change. That's how we fight racism, not with grand gestures, but with small, brave choices day after day. For those of you who say, well, I would not know where to start, you can begin with the EJW Super Simple Ally Rules from Elon James White, who says, speak out when you can, speak out even if it may be uncomfortable. Seek counsel from the group for which you are being an ally. Listen to their critiques and try to understand. And when you don't, simply be quiet until you do. Being an ally isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try, to mess up, to learn, and to keep showing up. Our journey towards wholeness will continue long after we die. But any one of us, anytime, can take that first awkward step to be an ally. Speaking of James Reeb in his eulogy at Brown Chapel on March 15, 1965, Martin Luther King said, "So in death, he says something to each of us, black and white alike. Says that we must substitute courage for caution. Says to us that we must be concerned not merely about who murdered him, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy that produced the murder. His death says to us that we must work passionately, unrelentingly, to make the American dream a reality. So he did not die in vain." Please join in singing hymn number 1024, "When the Spirit Says Do."
Gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord, you gotta do when the Spirit says do. Spirit says do. Spirit says do. Spirit says do. Spirit says do, you gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord, gotta do when the Spirit says do. 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 You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord, gotta do when the Spirit says do. 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 Or something like that.
That was exactly how it's supposed to sound. Please join me in a spirit of prayer. Divine Spirit, open our hearts to understanding and our minds to truth. Grant us the humility to listen when others speak their pain and the courage to stand beside them when they need us the most. Let us not mistake comfort for justice or silence for peace. Guide our feet to walk new paths, even when the way seems strange or difficult. Help us use our privilege as a bridge, not a barrier, and teach us that true strength lies in lifting others. And as we engage in this continuous struggle, when we falter, and we will falter, give us the grace to acknowledge our mistakes, the wisdom to learn from them, and the strength to begin again. May we remember that solidarity is not a destination, but a sacred commitment renewed with each rising sun. May we be united with others in the mission to heal this broken system, for in standing with others, we stand with all creation, and in serving justice, we serve the highest truth. And when future generations look back on these days, may they find that each of us helped bend that long arc of the moral universe just a little closer toward justice. So may it be. Our last hymn is We Shall Overcome, number 169 in your
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace.
May that spark, that light, and that fire of commitment within each of us live on long after we have gone.
We shall overcome. When we can truly celebrate the diversity of contributions and talents offered by all people, we shall overcome hatred and prejudice and oppression. When we can truly extend our hands to one another in loving acceptance, we shall overcome the past that haunts us now. Living in peace and freedom, we shall overcome the wrongs that have happened and the debts left unpaid. Let us join together in that commitment to overcome. Let us say together, Amen. Amen.